Not everyone is lucky enough to have a mentor or someone older and wiser guiding them through the unspoken rules of the workplace. Most of us just have to learn the hard way. But I'm on a mission to change that, and this podcast is that mission. Welcome to Season 2 of How to Survive Your Boss, where each episode brings real stories and practical advice from incredible professionals who've lived it. I'm Kiana, your host. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. We are excited to introduce some incredible leadership joining us today. Keesha is coming in. Where are you dialing in from, Keesha?
New Jersey, New Jersey, near New York City.
Absolutely. So back by the big city, and she is here to talk to us a little bit about some advice that she has from her great experience in both HR and I think some overall leadership roles. So Keesha, I'm going to pass it to you if you could just introduce a little bit of your background, where your career is, and kind of your expertise.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much to the two of you for allowing me to have this space to talk to you about some pretty important topics as it relates to the workplace. I started my career in the late 90s in a direct marketing agency, and I spent about the first 10 years of my career doing marketing work for clients. Then I moved into HR through the talent management space, which was essentially managing people's career, matching people's skills to the types of briefs that we were working on for a client, assembling teams, doing compensation, rotation plans, things of that nature. I quickly fell in love with it, which I did not expect. I actually expected to hate it, but I was given the opportunity for a lateral move, and I said, okay, well, what's the risk? They're letting me know that I could go lateral. If it doesn't work out and I don't like it, I can go back to the marketing role I was in. So no risk. Fast forward to the fact that I loved it led to I just started to move up the chain, and I was given more and more responsibility. And I'll say this, I have never been trained in HR. I don't have any of the certifications. What I have is a sensibility for people, just in general.
Yeah.
And I also have an understanding of business and marketing. So as far as industries, it was kind of easy for me to just draw some parallels. And I went from being an associate director in talent management to running HR for an office. This was an agency. Then I moved across the country to the West Coast, and I got an opportunity to run HR, basically talent and culture is what it was called, for a world-renowned advertising agency called Wyden & Kennedy. I moved back to the East Coast. East Coast is home. And I had just an incredible opportunity to work in great companies. One was Post Magazines at the point that they were transitioning to be more digitally forward versus print. And then I got recruited to take a role in Geneva, Switzerland, working under the global chief people officer. So I've been the kind of person that bring a very different sensibility. I felt like an outsider when it comes to core HR, but because I bring all these other things, it was sort of like, companies coming to recruit me for change, to evolve HR, to make it a cornerstone in some ways connected to the business, but really about the people. And that's what my career has been. Up until about 2 years ago, I was internal, and then I decided to start my own company, which I started about 2.5 years ago. So that's awesome. Me now.
An incredible background. Yeah, I did not realize the pivot that you took from market. I remember you mentioning you had started in marketing when we first met, but I didn't realize it was truly just this leap of faith. Was that early on in your career?
Oh yeah, it was year 10, something like that.
Oh wow.
I looked at the person who was saying you should move into HR. I was like, who does that? Why would I do that? I don't even know what you do. I was so clueless about HR, but she kept saying that if you think of it as marketing and an understanding of people and what we're trying to do by, you have a goal, like a business goal or a marketing goal, she was like, it's the same thing. And I was like, all right, let's give this a shot. And ultimately what you're also doing, if you're this type of HR person, is you're putting things out into the workplace to drive some type of behavior. Engagement is a behavior, collaboration is a behavior. So you know what I mean? It does, there are parallels.
Never thought of it that way. Yeah, we might have to have a sidebar conversation after this. I want to pick your brain about something on that. But we'll get right into the contents of this episode because you came with some really, really great advice, I think, that just tees off what everybody learns eventually in their career. So, Keesha, looking back, when it comes to your professional career with both, politics and various managers that you've had over this widespread of experience, what's something that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career that you had to learn the hard way?
This is going to be interesting, I think, for folks. I thought that being a truth teller was like the way. And I thought that, people, leaders, managers, whomever, they want to hear the truth, right? And if you told the truth, and what I mean by that is, insights, right, about what's going on with this group or that group, being able to create themes on that, not just one-off issues. And bring all of that to leadership with suggestions. I thought, good, this is how we do it. You operate with integrity, operating with the greater good in mind. And what I realized is that not every leader wants to hear the truth, and that problems rise to the top. So sometimes it's not all about like, I don't want to hear the truth. It's a matter of what else is going on that person's plate that is filling their calendar, what problems are already out there that they're dealing with, and how do you navigate around that? So the other aspect of this is that if you think of relationship building, right, and a currency exchange, political capital is really important. So building relationships, building up trust, showing results, things of that nature have a lot to do with workplace dynamics, but so does the perception. So your influence, your positional status is actually what defines or creates a path of influence. And some people use that influence for the greater good. And then there's the opposite side, which is some people use it for not so good. So I realized, I was like, telling the truth and getting people to operate in terms of that truth is not comfortable for most people. And I wish I realized that sooner, because I wonder if I wouldn't have as many stops and stalls around some of the changes I was going to bring about. And not only just about work stalls, workflow or vision, or strategy being stalled, but also this questioning of, well, who is she? What is she talking about? You know what I mean? Who is she to tell me, like, this is what's up? Why aren't my people coming to tell me themselves? It was that
like truth telling piece. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like, you're not ready for the truth is like that funny saying. And I've seen it a lot in my own professional career as well. Did you notice a difference between roles, like when you were in marketing versus when you were in the HR side, if there was like a difference in how much truth people were willing to accept? Because I feel like HR is more people oriented, it's more internal oriented. Like if anybody's touching internal politics, it's going to be more on that side.
Oh, that's a good question. So HR has a stigma. And look, I have believed that for a very long time, and I still believe some of that stuff is true. But essentially, it's about the perception of HR, people's motivations, So sometimes HR people come across as being more oriented to, I'm going to take care of the business, and less of an advocate for employees. So you do have to find a way to, I'm not going to say bridge the gap, because it's not a gap you want to bridge, but you have to work on perception.
Sure.
You got, if you're of this mindset, work on perception, really show and demonstrate the people advocacy that you bring, but the perception is not just for the chief people officer. It's also for the, among the people who are on the ground day to day with HR. So, while I'm coming in thinking it was like playing chess in some way, moving the pieces around and all that, people were playing poker. And that's not, I was just like, Lord, have mercy. How many games do we need to play? And how many players are there that are distracting us from the work that can actually get done? And where's the integrity? Now, I say all this to say I have worked in some amazing places, some really amazing people that I've worked under and around. But that's not to say that other parts of a company don't operate this way, meaning people are playing using their political capital for good and some
Mm-hmm.
for bad, and just playing the role and playing games. So trying to get to the truth of that is so uncomfortable for people. I would never point it out to management as, oh, they're playing games. I would actually, you know what I mean? I know how to say things in a more PC way, because it's
Right.
not about that. It's about getting to the root cause of something going on in the environment, and why that root cause is, why that thing is an issue, what it's blocking, and what's the opportunity to actually remove those blockages.
Keisha, I did have a question for you. How did you figure out what like leaders are using the information for good? Like you said that earlier.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's action, right?
Mm,
And action, so it goes to culture for me. So it's what the action looks like, right? So did we take note of the thing that happened? Have we taken note of the thing that happened with the mindset of let's do the right thing, right? And if you didn't do the right thing at first, right, which is, it happens with people, right?
mm,
What is the next right thing? Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it sounds super simple, and it's not simple, but if looking at people's actions, hearing what the outcomes are, you can quickly tell or decipher, okay, is this person operating with the greater
Mm,
good in mind? Are they going to do the right thing, and according to who?
Right.
What is the right thing that's being defined, right? And and again, if that first attempt didn't work, well, what is the next right thing to do? So you see patterns, you hear patterns, and I will never say that getting it right the first time is like, oh, you're bad, because come on, that's not realistic, right?
yeah.
But making
Like
the
us starting
attempt.
this pod.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? We all live and learn, and we all relate. Some of us get along with others, some of we don't. But your
Yeah.
work product, your actions, like, that's how you begin. I think that's how you begin to tell. You start to see the signs.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I'm just thinking like they say actions speak louder than words. And I know I've had instances where I've had leaders in an organization that say amazing things. Really.
Yeah.
Like you're bought in. You're like, hey, I'm here for this. This sounds great. I am this culture. And then you look at the actions of those exact same leaders and you're like, wait, you don't even follow some of these virtues yourself, and maybe the math doesn't math a little bit, and it kind of gets, I don't know what the right word is, maybe it gets a little messy, but it's also like I don't think people can perform 100% perfectly 100% of the time.
Yeah,
That's like unrealistic. Everybody makes mistakes. Managers are humans too.
that's
But
right.
to your point, like there is a trend in actions where you can at least tell, even if they're maybe failing a little
Hmm.
bit more often than succeeding, it's the intention of those actions, and how closely do they line up to the words that
Yeah.
they've been saying.
Oh yeah, and you can hear intentionality, in a conversation,
Mm,
meaning positive intent versus someone who's just performing. Like, you can really, you start to hear it, and you start to know. I also, though, and this is the HR side of me, it's like you can develop better skills, and so I do believe that people are coachable as long as they have self-awareness and are willing to go to that step. But you're not going to be coachable if you're not up for feedback, and you have to be willing to hear the truth. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Well
The
stated, not
truth
to
about yourself
undermine.
too.
Yeah, the truth about yourself and how you're showing up and how you're coming across. And there's all kinds of things that are like probably in a positive bucket, and maybe there's some in a negative bucket, but you got to be willing to
Mm-hmm.
hear that stuff. And sometimes I find in the workplace, people's egos are so fragile. So,
Yeah. I wonder too if like the egos being fragile is a mechanism of like job security sometimes. Like I know in previous workplaces that I've had, when there is a lack of psychological safety to, make a mistake or to, let's say, stumble along the path of figuring out what you're trying to do. I've seen cases where those environments make it very hard to take any type of feedback. I also think a huge chunk of it is an individual themselves, of course, naturally, but just from the demeanor of like a leader giving feedback. I've gotten employees before where they came from a bad environment previously.
Yep.
And when I try to give them feedback, it becomes like this crazy defense mechanism, or like really overworking for something really small, right? Like really small
Mhm.
feedback, like, hey, you could have just done this a little better, or maybe this should have been different. But the reaction as a result of the critique is so much larger than I think I would have expected for something so small. And I feel like
Yep.
there's a mechanism you learn.
Oh man, and that can happen very early on in someone's tenure at a company, and it's exhausting. It's like I don't know if either of you play sports, but it's like you showed up for the game, you're ready to play, but the rules have changed. No one told you
Mm,
the rules, but you're still getting penalized for something you didn't even know. And maybe you knew that, oh, okay, well, that's going to draw a penalty. Well, what's not? You know what I
right.
mean? What do I need to be doing that's different than this? And again, if the rules of the game are constantly changing, it's just this is the psychological safety piece where you're left spinning.
Mm,
And who can be productive? It's just like anything, like if I'm super nervous, like I like to cook dinner for my kids, and I notice that when I'm scattered, I'm stressed or whatever, I'm more likely to overcook something. You know what I mean? It's not just gonna be, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's energy, it's the exhaustion, it's like the mental space, or
Yeah.
mental real estate, that those things take up. And it's not healthy, so one of the things I try to do, because trust me, in HR, I can't tell you how many key phrases employees bring, right? Toxic, bullying. And I'm not
Mm,
saying any of this is not true, but I'm just saying the words in a day that you could hear with somebody, so many people complaining about the thing, their situation, their environment. And I have to be the one to peel the layers back to really understand what's underneath. And I've said to people, what's the opposite? Like what would make this an experience, a positive and healthy experience from you? Because if all I'm hearing are the complaints and we're just stuck on that part, I have nothing to go back and coach that person on. That will be right for you versus
mm.
what I think could be right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's super
Yeah.
interesting. That's like really interesting. I've never thought of. I had a executive coach once that gave me the advice of like, Kiana, if you're always looking at it as this one way, it will always be that way.
There you
And
go.
so, reframe, maybe that's like a mentality check here a little bit, is like, well, what is the opposite of this way and what does it look like? And I think a lot of people maybe haven't experienced that. That's kind of the whole idea of this podcast, is
Yeah.
when you haven't experienced what the good looks like, how do you even navigate it? So to pivot that into maybe a little bit more specifics here, because I love this
Mhm.
topic. Like, we're talking about truth telling, we're talking about what that navigation looks like with your boss. Do you have any specific examples, not details, but just like a case where we can bring some light behind, you had a truth, you were trying to share a truth, it received a poor response from said manager, and maybe like what you think would have been that better version of a response?
Well, so I will say, so coming into a company as the head of HR and not having a positive employee experience and knowing that you want to create that for other people, I swear it is the biggest contradiction. And
Mm,
I have significant issues with that, because how is it that we're trying to create an experience for other people that we don't even experience or bring into the HR department? So I say all that to say, hell yeah, I've had those instances. One that stands out is that upon relocating to a particular company and moving my family, so my husband, my kids, dogs, I had a very short window from the team's perspective. I had a very short window of time before I could start to make impact. So for them, it was like, yep, sit in the meetings, read all the documents. We need to start working on this, this, and this, right? Well, the reality of life is relocated, have to settle. My kids change schools, got to go back to all these places to set up our life, blah, 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 right? That takes time, that takes mental capacity, right? At the same time, you have to be given access to information to be able to acclimate yourself to, well, what's the work? What are
mhm.
you doing? What are the strategies that are, let me look achieve. Um, so the judgment that was coming in so fast from the team, yet the contradiction of just sit in the meetings and listen turned into sit in the meetings and listen, And then don't worry about involving yourself after that. So that was one thing. What ended up
Whoa.
happening is I started to surface this stuff to my manager. I said, this is creating a very toxic environment, not just for me as someone who's senior. I'm hearing it from the interns who aren't getting access to information. I'm hearing it from mid-level people. I'm hearing it from people who are also my peers. There is something wrong. The question then,
Mhm.
her question to me was, well, what are you going to do to change? And I said, why is it up to me to change? There are 5 people who are creating this reality, and they're not just creating this reality for me. And I knew at that point that asking one person to change a complete dynamic, to be empathetic to a group of people who were blocking, and knowing I was new, not just to the company, but also I had relocated, I was like, this is one of the biggest failures I've ever seen. And
Mm.
moving it forward and not being able to get support as a new employee with all those circumstances around it, I was like, well, understanding the human condition. We're saying all this stuff and we want to provide all this stuff, but if we can't do it for ourselves, what are we really doing it for? So I started to understand motivations and organizational behavior, and also going broader for me personally. And I was like, well, Keesha, what kind of employee experience do you need in order to feel
Mm.
like, in order to make a decision on the company you're going to work for, the person you're going to go and work under?
Dang, girl. That sucks. I'm so sorry. That sounds terrible. Do you think that like HR jobs have a harder role, like have a harder time because of their role? Are they like more likely to be treated poorly and harsher because it's your job to make other people happy?
Yeah. And I don't think that people look at us as people. Like
Yeah.
literally the
Yeah.
label is HR. Oh,
Right.
you're HR. Not, oh, you're Keesha, a woman of a certain age. Oh, you have kids. Like the immediate before everything is just your HR. And I'll tell you, when I was in marketing, I was an individual, right? Like by
Mm-hmm.
name. When I initially come to any company with the HR halo, it's your HR. And then that's where the trust building is like, it's a long road, for HR people to
Mm.
build that trust. And more of the time, you lose political capital, quote unquote, because you have to share things, you have to share things about
Yeah.
confidentially with care. But like I said, the stigma and how people in HR operate with that kind of information either pulls them into that stigma and they get labeled, or helps them to identify human to human and no longer
Mm.
with the label of you're just HR. Because when people say it that way, we're expendable, you know?
Yeah, that's tough. Well, and I've had, it's interesting because some of the companies I've worked at have had really small HR, and then some of them have had really, really like larger HR teams. And I feel like I don't know if there's a trend. Haven't worked at enough companies yet, but I do feel like there's this trend. It's kind of like with a regular business, like coming from marketing. We always tell businesses if you invest more in marketing and making, good branding, good awareness, all of these things, you build a much better kind of image and perception in the public, which then eventually turns into sales. It's not like overnight, it's a long-term investment, but it turns into sales. And I feel like with some companies, they internally, it's the same idea with HR, where it's like the same kind of expendable investment. Because if somebody has a bad quarter, the first thing they do is they cut marketing.
Yeah.
Like, well,
Oh,
we didn't
yeah.
sell stuff. So let's
Sales.
spend less money on
Uh-huh.
selling, right?
Yep.
Let's spend less money on trying to make the company bigger and let's spend more money on Lord knows what. And I feel like from an internal employee satisfaction turnover side, it's kind of the same, right? Like if you invest heavily in HR, you can see those benefits because you have higher employee retention. You have more of this, what's it called? Like church versus state type idea. Like there
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this it's just business idea, and HR kind of gaps the bridge between it's just business and actually it's people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's like a bridge between that. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree
So,
wholeheartedly. That's the thing is your company employees bought something by coming to
mm,
work there, right? And the company bought something, right? We both agreed. And so nurturing the relationship between the company and the employees is important. Some environments, some leaders, and some employees don't see it that way. And so that's another gap. And that's one
yeah.
where I say educate leadership, educate other people that it's like we bought something, right? We need to nurture this relationship. It's like anything else.
Hmm.
My mentor, the one who told me to come into HR, she would always say, like a bank account, there are debits and credits. And if you think in
Mm.
that way, then you start to see and understand the possibilities, right? And the kind of the humanity behind the person, but also the possibilities in terms of where that relationship can go because it needs to grow,
Mm.
and so I was like, I came in with these philosophical things, like concepts or whatever, but in reality, when you see it play out, we can talk about this, and you see the same thing in churches and schools. I mean, it's just the dynamic of people.
Yeah, so basically everyone should major in psychology because if you're gonna navigate anything, you need a bucket of that. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. So, okay, one of our favorite things is we like to kind of flip the script, similar to what you were saying of, what's the good outcome or what's the good version of how a manager should behave. Similar to that, we want to flip the script and like from the boss's POV, right? Why do you think they are so, sometimes some bosses are so hesitant to receiving the truth, or they need the truth delivered in a certain way, or maybe they have a fragile ego? Like, is there, I know we talked about, psychological safety, we talked a little bit about job stability, but is there anything that you think, like really stands out to you with how a boss is thinking?
Very much. And it's where their orientation is. In the cases when we're talking about, let's call it toxic, for instance, the orientation is on the work and the business itself. So produce, right? We need to produce. We don't have time for all this other stuff that's distracting us from getting the work done. We have a business to run. We need to all be focused on that. We need to achieve our goals, right? So there is definitely that. And let's just say, yeah, okay, we should be doing all of that, right? We're here to work for a reason. We get a paycheck for a reason. But I would say that's one of the biggest things I've seen. And then the other one is just like truly, people have not even developed the skills. You
Mm.
can get promoted based on your craft skills, and that's it and alone, right? You can get promoted because of the revenue you're bringing into the company. That's it, and that's alone, right? Separate from people leadership. So the other side, to your point, is what are we doing to help people develop those skills to lead people,
Yeah.
communicate with people, collaborate with people. So you have other competencies that could be completely missing, from that person
Mm.
based on, whether they got promoted from the kind of business revenue or whatever they're driving for the company.
What do you think the role of HR is? Kiana has mentioned to me before that HR is kind of there just to keep the company safe. They don't really care too much about, all the other things, but you seem like the kind of HR leader that like cares about people and you want to have that kind of connection. So what do you think that role is supposed to be?
Okay, so I love this. First, I want to say there are so many disciplines within HR, and that's also not
Mm.
always understood. So you have people that do payroll and benefits and the systems. Then you have people who are out there engaging with employees. You got people who do learning and development. You got a whole bunch. You could put the inclusion work as well in that category. To me, it breaks down into three buckets, which is people, talent, and culture. So under people, right? Just how are we
Hmm.
treating them? What's our sensibility around people? What experience do we want them to have, right? What is the purpose and values of the company? Signals to the people who work here that we care about them, we have integrity, or whatever it is. And that people orientation is what also leads and guides you to say things as simple as what's covered in our benefits plan? What do we need to add? How much
Yeah.
is that? How much is it costing people? Did we round it out to include mental health? That's like a new, one of the new areas. Have we rounded it out to include reproductive care? Like, if you have people, then that way of thinking should seep into everything. Talent is about skill sets and skill sets that we need on the business, that we want to grow on the business, that we need in order to do the work. So the kind of skill sets I need in finance versus marketing versus tech, right? The company has to know out and how to go out and find that talent, how to
Yeah.
decipher the talents that individuals have, and all of that. So this is a big part of HR that can get bucketed quickly in just recruitment, but it's so much more than that. We look at career pathing, who's up next for the next job, compensation based on performance. Culture is all about the positive and healthy environment people need to be in order to do the best work of their lives and the best work that they can as a contribution to the business. So culture I look at as literally the team environment, the workplace environment, and that takes on many forms. So some people have that expanded view of HR. Some people don't. Some
We
companies
do now.
want,
Yeah.
right? Some companies want that. Some companies do
Yeah.
not. Right. And I've learned to just say, well, that's okay. It's your call, your company, and okay, what is the outcome going to be? Somebody has to be responsible for this stuff. Right. Every
Yeah.
individual carries culture with them. You walk down the hall, you're carrying something. You could be interacting in a toxic way. You could be adding to the gossip. You could be sabotaging as well. You know what I mean? And so we all carry little parts of culture with us. And so I hope I'm answering your question, but there is an expanded view that HR
Yeah.
can take. And when it's under the label of HR, I'll be honest,
Mm.
sometimes it's
The
like,
stigma.
already know. Or if it's under the like if HR is called the people department, or you know what I mean? Like you kind
Yeah.
of you get a signal, but how those things are delivered as far as an interaction between HR people, an interaction between leaders, and interactions between peers, that's when you really can get a clue as to what the culture stands for. Am I answering the
Mm.
question? Maybe that's too
No,
much.
I think no, that was first off, everybody needs the 101 on what HR is, because that was
Yeah.
definitely, I think that also connects it a little bit to what I was saying earlier about just like a company's investment in HR. And now I'm sitting here thinking like, you know what is a really good sign of a toxic versus non-toxic type company is how they invest in HR. Because at a lot of the companies I've worked for, HR has been small. It's like maybe one person, it's one person wearing all of those hats that you just mentioned,
Yes.
which is, naturally very difficult. And I think there's a challenge with that because I also feel like HR has multiple bosses. This whole show is
Mm.
kind of about navigating your boss because you are ultimately like they're the first stop of your career. So you got to figure out how to kind of work with them and navigate the challenging situations like not wanting the whole truth and not being ready for the whole truth.
Yeah.
But HR is like kind of they're like everybody is a little bit of their boss in the sense of you're trying to navigate everyone in that way. Like if there's a situation where a manager needs to fire somebody, in that moment, that manager is kind of like your partner, but also in a little way like the boss in the sense of you need to understand like what's going on with them. Like, how do I address this situation with them? How do I talk to them about these crazy things?
Yeah.
So that's very challenging.
Yeah. So as much as we might prep, HR people will prep a manager or whomever, to have a conversation like the one you're talking about, or even to fire someone, right? For
Mm.
layoffs or other reasons. We're not in the room, generally speaking, when that exchange is happening. So, you know, you're left with two people, and then I'll also say this, and this is what I have been so challenged by, and I cannot stand with HR. I'm like, the scripting, so to speak, should sound more human, like, wait,
Like the layoff scripts.
hmm and you need them. There are so many reasons why. Like, there are certain things people have to say in a conversation like that. That is not, you don't take
Yeah.
that off the table, right? But at the end of the day, the way you break that news down, the pauses you take for the person who might be like absolutely distraught or the one that's just going to blow their angers coming out fiercely. It's like there's an art to the conversation. When do you pause? What is the actually, let's go back. What's the first thing you say? Right? You
Mm,
call that person, what's the first thing you say? What's the last thing you say? Like,
yeah.
hello, right? That's what we remember, And then I have heard recently because of all these layoffs, I have heard stories that I am just like, how I feel like I want to say to the company, how dare you? Like,
Yeah.
where do you get, I don't even, and some of these people I don't know, I read articles, I'm like, how dare you? And where do you get off doing that to somebody? Would you want it to happen to you that way?
Mm,
Would you
no.
want it to happen to a family member, a child? And God knows everyone will be like, no. So it's like, well, why? Why in the world, even if HR gave you a script that was missing humanity, why aren't we going through to say, and what's causing people to want to be that abrupt and that cold? I
Hmm.
really don't get it.
Yeah. No, I mean, we talked a little bit when we talked about layoffs. I was telling Tara how sometimes they'll just like remove your access. You won't even get
Oh,
a message. Like you just lose access and then you find out later that you were laid off via some like note or email to your personal doc. And it's like,
yeah,
I don't know,
Shady. Really
people,
shady.
yeah,
that's
people
right.
give, people give so much of themselves to a company and it's like, I forgot who it was. I had one HR person tell me that it's like a bucket of water filled with rocks. And if you remove a rock, the water's just going to fill in the blank. And that's how employees are kind of viewed is like, I can grab a whole handful of rocks,
Oh,
throw them out, and the water's still going to fill it. There's not going to be just like a pocket of air because I
mm,
removed the rocks. And it always stuck with me because no matter how important you are in a company, you're always a rock. Like you see CEOs get replaced, you see founders getting replaced, you see owners getting replaced. Now, the water in the bucket may not be the same, right? It may
yeah.
not be like the same climate or the same environment anymore. But the idea that, one rock being removed is going to crack the entire vase and all the water's going to fall out is just like not how it works.
That's right. That's right. And the stories you hear, how people are treated even when they resign, right? Like
Mm,
if you're treated like a traitor, if people stop talking to you, like those are all that's
red
all you
flags.
need to know to be
Yeah.
like, probably not me here. Now, the flip side of it in this economy is people need jobs.
Mm,
People need
so true
money.
though.
Oh,
People need
so
money.
yeah, so you get what you get, and I mean, you take what you get. I mean to say, you know,
Yeah. Do you think that that impacts? I mean, I'm sure it does, obviously, but like in the context of when it's a employee market versus an employer market, I feel like there's more treatment towards employees. Like right now, people don't need or people are not investing in DEI. One, maybe political reasons, but two, because to your point, people need jobs. Like, do
yeah,
we really need this extra investment in additional culture and HR things? Because, people are going to work regardless. I feel like there was a huge trend in things like quiet quitting or
yeah,
quiet vacationing. And now I can't remember the term of this trend, but there's some trend where it's like work forever mentality now. And it's just like work until like the worst case scenario could potentially happen and just give it your all. And that
yeah.
trend's starting to rise. And I feel like that's such a shift where we were 3 years ago, 4 years ago, like early COVID when it was such an employee market.
Yeah, the phrase is job hugging. It's, well,
There
you
it
can
is.
call it job clinging, like it is like, hey, so whatever treatment might be part of there, whatever, in some cases people are laying low, right? To not be a target for any reason. And the fear of losing their job and also the number of people who are unemployed anyway, it's just like, nope, hold on, so this job hugging, I learned about, or I heard the phrase, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I was like, damn, that is like, it's a 180 from where we were.
I'm like, the job hugging thing really lands because
I feel like, I've been fortunate enough to have like jobs pretty easily in like my path, and it hasn't been too hard. But I know so many colleagues that are like, I just met with a good friend the other day, told me they had been applying for 12 months and they were going on 12 months of rigorous applying, 20 months of total applying, like
Oh,
8
wow.
months while like still sitting, and I think it even gets more challenging, when you get older and you start to find yourself in this level of expertise. That's, there's less jobs. There's less
Yeah.
jobs there's less directors in a company than there are analysts. And so
Yeah.
when you find that level of expertise, it just like, I don't know, gets really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Back to
man.
the truth telling, Keisha, do you think it's even more important for people to keep their truths to themselves during the like tough economy, I'd say?
God, that's such a beautiful question and a hard one. It's a hard one. Keep it to themselves. I would say if there is something that is fundamentally wrong, that is creating a lot of tension and frustration, share it with someone you feel safe with. Have no expectation, right? Because you're not responsible for an outcome. But get it out of your body and your mind, your spirit with someone you feel safe with. I hate the idea of people suffering, with anything, in any way. I've been there personally. I know what it's done that's created real health issues for me. But ultimately, if it's getting to that point at work, finding an outlet is important. Now, here's the kicker. What do you share? How do you share? Like, literally, what do you say? And I have seen people who are like they're putting it all on the line, and it's like,
Oh, we talked about that. Oh, we
it's
talked
like
about
you
that.
kind of got to know your audience, right? You need to be able to filter, but sometimes the
Yeah.
things that people are going through are so emotionally heavy, that they just don't know, and they're speaking first out of emotion, and so, you also, on the receiving end, I'll say this, holding space in an appropriate way is important to do with people. And sometimes that emotional download that you get first just needs to come out. And then you can help them figure it out later and restate. But I'm never the one to say, like, don't share it with someone. Just know your audience. If it's creating a lot of physiological and other kind of pain for you, do something about it. But if you're in an environment where emotions, there's only one or two emotions that are acceptable here. One is when we're celebrating success and showing pride for a company. If that's all they care about, keep it to yourself.
Share it with your pet,
Get a coach.
like our good friend told us.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good friend told us, talk to your pet about the problems.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
they're a safe space no matter what.
Yeah.
Don't blast it on LinkedIn, guys.
Serious. Well, my new thing is Claude is my best friend. Like Claude and I feel like Claude and AI, right? The chat GPT.
Yeah.
I'm like, Claude and I feel like go back to the day I was born. Like I put my stuff in there and it's like, giving me feedback. And I'm like, well, tell me what I did wrong. So you can also use
That's Kiana.
chat GPT.
That's me.
She loves her
Yeah.
chat
Yeah.
GPT, right?
Well, because in my head, like recently I've been grappling again with this concept of giving feedback to leadership that I don't know very well. Because it's very rare that you like know leadership on a personal level where you have like a deep trust with them. Like you don't necessarily walk into most situations with that.
True.
And so I've been grappling with this, like, I have things that are bothering me and they're on my chest in the sense of, I don't know, maybe I don't feel so confident about these plans, or maybe I have some concerns with like expectations that are being put on me. But then I'm also like, I don't want to go to my boss and say, I can't do this job and I suck and I don't know shit. Like, I can't say that. So I've been literally messaging with my chat because I'm like, all right, here's my thoughts and feelings. How do I package that up in a way where instead of it coming off as like, I can't do this job, kind of chat brought to me and said, if you position it as if I put my pessimistic mindset on and I look at all the challenges in front of us, here's one of the big ones that I'm seeing. And I'm curious what your take is as leadership in this dynamic of how we could approach said pessimistic POV.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Thank you, chat.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
No, that was like the thing I've been so I don't know. The truth speaking, I think Keesha, I wish you were my HR at one point in time. I feel like I would have had a different at least perspective of HR, because I've had so many times where I don't know, I think to your point, HR does get a bad rep, but they also get it for a good reason. Like there's a lot of players out there that don't care about the people, that don't care about let's say connecting the gap between it's just business and it's human beings.
That's right.
And so it's hard to find. You're a diamond in the rough. Can't wait to have more episodes with you, because I think, tell you what, Lil T, me and Keesha can just deep dive on mental health in the workplace. Like it is
Yippee.
every time we have a chat, it's like, let's compare notes. What have you seen? Like,
Yeah.
it's impressive.
Yeah. And honestly, at some point, we don't live in the same state, but it's one of those where I'm just like,
yeah, we got to
we
meet.
should just get together, because our conversations, you could put the meeting time out and our conversations just keep going.
Oh, yeah. No, they definitely keep going. But thank you so much, Keesha. We really appreciate you coming here and sharing your advice. I think to the greater public and to all of our listeners, number one is, truth telling in the workplace is something you got to navigate with caution. You have to, I understand who you're working with, who's on the other side of those truths. Are they ready for those truths? Should you hold those truths in and tell them to your pet later at night? And kind of build out, get those emotions out, but don't necessarily dump your emotions on your manager, because it's not always the right place. And I think, Keesha, I just want to give you the floor real quick, because she is doing some incredible stuff. So just a quick little promotion of Keesha and her awesome business and everything she's been working on.
Okay. Well, I have to say this one last thing, and I'll do
Yeah.
that. So I heard from one of my clients, actually, she told me the motto the founder lives by is making sure that when people go home at night, that whoever is at home with them, a spouse, roommate, a dog, a pet, that they have good news to share. And I was like, that changes everything. If a manager and a leader knows that that's the founder's goal, then you're going to do everything you can to basically not go against that. And if you did go against that, you're the outcast. You know what I mean? But I'm like, what a beautiful thought. Damn, I want you to come home and say something that's exciting and that you enjoyed about work, versus bringing all your problems home because the place is broken.
Right.
Your dog's like, I'm leaving. I'm packing my bags. I can't handle your negative shit anymore.
Yeah, go to a therapist. Your dog will actually start talking to you. So one of the programs I want to talk about and just mention as a quick, PSA, I guess, is that I've been studying compassion for the past couple of years and really trying to understand compassion in the broader context. But then I studied compassionate leadership specifically. And what does that mean? How does it show up at work and in communities? So I became an accredited teacher through an organization that actually created a certification program. And so the organization that created this is called the Center for Compassionate Leadership. The founders, as well as academics and neuroscientists, put together the curriculum, and it's in 8 modules over 8 weeks. And it's like you're taking a course in college. You said psychology. It's a part of, it's sort of like a class in psychology or sociology. So anyway, I do cohorts every quarter pretty much. And I would love to spread the word about this. People need more care. There's so much suffering that's going on in the world and spilling into every part of our lives that we touch, so workplaces as well as in our communities and, all of that. So I'm super happy that I chose this path it was several years ago, like I said, before a lot of things were already happening in the world. And teaching has been my sanctuary. I learned from the participants as much, I'm teaching, but I also learn from them, and I just love it. So anyone who's interested, I'll provide a link to you all to sign up or to at least get on the wait list for the next cohort.
I might need in that.
But little T is going to skip right from entering as a compassionate employee and go straight to leader.
Yeah.
That's the goal of this pod. But no, I appreciate that, Keesha. I'm definitely I'm gonna have to talk to you later about that too, because I'm really curious to learn more. Your course, their course, all the courses. I think compassion in the workplace is something we've lost. And it's a mechanism of economy. It's a mechanism of greed. It's a mechanism of the leadership styles. Like, to your point, there's this saying, the fish rots out the head. With that one leader making it about, taking home good news, it just shows how the rest of the fish is going to perform and how the rest of that body and organization is going to go. So anyways, if this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and send it to a friend who's currently fighting, maybe trying to grapple with their truth-telling in the workplace. And they're going to have to find this out the hard way. But if you send them this, it's going to speed things up for them. And otherwise than that, check out our website. Check out Keesha's website. And thank you all. Peace and love.
Peace and
Paper
love.
trails.
Thank you.